including the Embassy of the US of America in Bangkok, parliamentary committees and leading Thai universities. Please give a round of applause for Verapat.
Good afternoon. My name is Verapat. I'm going to be talking today about the role of law and nationalism. Can anyone guess what I'm talking about today? Can anyone see a location on the map on the screen? It's actually a location pointing to a temple, an ancient ruins, a Khmer temple called Pravihir, or as we say in Thailand, Pravihan. This temple situates between on the border of Thailand and Cambodia. Let's zoom in a little bit. You can see here, Pravihir or Pravihan, depending on the pronunciation. I will take this temple as a case study on how the law plays a role when a society, or two societies in this case, has to confront the issue of nationalism. So let's take a brief look at the background about Pravihir or Pravihan. The ancient ruin situates on a very special location, as you can see. Far behind is Thailand, down here is Cambodia, and for some historical and treaty interpretation reasons, this temple belongs to Cambodia, but the two countries are trying to figure out what about the area surrounding the temple, who owns precisely where. So the temple has very high cultural significance. It is on the process of becoming a World Heritage Site, listed by UNESCO. And the temple was an issue of territorial dispute between Thailand and Cambodia back in 1960s, and the case was brought to the International Court of Justice in The Hague. And after the court decided that the temple actually belongs to Cambodia, the court did not specify who actually owns areas surrounding the temple, and it is still being disputed between the two countries. So before we jump into what sort of role of law that we can see from this situation, let's take a look a little bit of the progression of the incident surrounding this temple. So as I said, in 1962, the International Court of Justice decided that the temple, Pravihir or Pravihan, belongs to Cambodia, but the area surrounding the temple remains unclear. Fast forward to 2008, Cambodia applied for the temple to be listed as UNESCO World Heritage Site. UNESCO being the same organization that recognized Puey, Ungphakorn today. UNESCO was considering the application. Thailand, of course, although had to admit that by the verdict of the World Court that the temple belongs to Cambodia, Thailand to try to persuade Cambodia that let's list this temple together so we can share resources, the budgets, we can manage the temple itself and the area surrounding together. But naturally, Cambodia decides that it owns the temple, so it will not co-list with Thailand. And therefore, the Thai government at the time decided that since we could not prevent Cambodia from unilaterally listing the temple, why not come up with an agreement, a form of agreement that is called a joint communique. The joint communique signed by Thailand and Cambodia essentially says that Thailand would not object Cambodia listing this temple. Thailand actually agrees Cambodia listing this temple as World Heritage Site, and therefore would be considered a World Heritage significance, and both the Thais and Cambodians and people from around the world can come and visit and enjoy this World Heritage Site of cultural and historical significance. But as a result of this joint communique, Thailand also states, and Cambodia agrees, that the area surrounding the temple, loosely speaking, will be subject to further negotiations. Cambodia would not list the area surrounding the temple as a heritage site as part of the heritage site. Now, of course, by signing this declaration, this joint communique, the foreign minister was heavily criticized by the certain groups of Thai people. And according to the BBC, the situation, as you can see in the quote there, the decision enraged Thai nationalists, and both sides began a build-up of troops in the area. Interesting enough, there was a case brought to the Thai Constitutional Court to decide whether the joint communique signed between the foreign ministers of Thailand and Cambodia were indeed valid. And the court indeed in 2008 struck down this joint communique, and I will discuss this legal issue later on. But sad enough, unfortunately, after the court struck down joint communique, the attempt to list this temple without disagreements came to an end, and what followed were military clashes along the borders. Thai Cambodians were killed, and tens of thousands of locals had to flee the area due to the weapons and bombs and grenades. So as we can see on the photos, although it's a very beautiful, very significant cultural heritage site, during the conflict periods, troops were stationed there. And these are photos, an example of several photos of the damage. This shows the rooftop of a school in Thailand being damaged by the fighting. And it's not just between the Thais and the Cambodians who were fighting. The Thai people at the time were also fighting among ourselves. As you can see in these photos, a group of protesters that were generally regarded as nationalist wanted to stage a movement to claim back the sovereignty over the temple privy here. So they marched towards the temple, and they were met with opposition from the local Thais living in the area. And some of us may wonder, why would the local Thais disagree with the attempts to claim back the temple? Of course, the local Thais lived there. They were friends and neighbors with the people across the border. They had to trade. Some of their family members might even marry into their families. And when there are political tensions and military clashes, it's the people on the borders who have to suffer. So these were the backgrounds and the situations surrounding the temporal privy in the period of 2008 to 2011. So let's look at what the court essentially said, and this brings us to the issue: what sort of role of law, as an example, play in a situation where society is confronted with issues of nationalism? The court had to decide whether the joint communique signed between two foreign ministers, Thailand essentially saying that we are not objecting, we are agreeing that privy here would be listed as were decided by Cambodia, but Cambodia would also agree not to list the area surrounding the temple. The court was asked to determine whether the foreign minister had the authority to proceed to sign the document, because there is a clause under the Thai constitution, section 190 under the constitution in force at the time, that a treaty which provides for a change in Thai territories must be approved by National Assembly. Of course, at the time, the foreign minister said that that document, that joint communique, first of all, is not a treaty, and second of all, it does not provide for a change in Thai territories, because it simply has to do with the temple that already belongs to Cambodia, listing it as World Heritage Site, and we just try to, according to the foreign minister at the time, prevent Cambodia from claiming any sorts of sovereignty over the area surrounding the temple. Now, if you look at the text of the constitution, which I underlined here, a treaty which provides for a change in Thai territories must be approved by the parliament. So what happened in that case was that the foreign minister and his legal teams and the bureaucrats from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as certain members of the military, in fact, the mapping experts, came before the court and showed the court that there is no change in territory. The joint communique has nothing to do with territorial boundary. We just try to prevent Cambodia from claiming any rights over areas surrounding the temple. To much surprise, the court came out with a verdict and say that in its reading, the section 190, which provides that a treaty which provides for a change in Thai territories, according to the court at the time, means that if there is a chance, an opportunity, an uncertainty that a treaty which may change the Thai territory, that treaty must be approved by National Assembly. Now, we don't have time to go into details whether the actual document is considered a treaty or not, but it is quite interesting, because if you read the whole opinion of the court seems to have a concern, more or less a national interest concern, or some would say nationalistic concern, whether if the foreign minister in fact proceeded with the agreement, it would bring about further conflicts, perhaps between the people within the nations or between the two countries. And so the court said, the agreement is not valid because it was not approved by National Assembly, even though the court did not and could not come up with precise determination whether there was a change in territory. Now, the lesson learned from this is it did not provide an actual solution to this because, as you can see from the facts that if you look back, after the court came up with this decision in 2008, the troops indeed continued to clash. Soldiers were killed on both sides and Philippines had to flee the area. That's not just one incident, but that's several incidents between 2008 and 2011. So how do we come to understand this judicial role, this legal role that has to do with a situation where societies are confronted with nationalistic sentiments? Who actually owns this precious gem on the land? And I think, and I'm gonna make this very succinct, and I think what we can learn from this situation is that first of all, there are limits to the law. The law is not there to identify what is nationalism or what is not nationalism. I think the second point we can learn from this is if you look at the conflicts, at least between the Thai people, I think they can all call themselves nationalist or patriotic in their sense. Because there's not a single version on how you identify nationalism. Of course, to a certain group of people, they could see that we have to claim the land. That's an expression of nationalism. Whereas other groups might say that peace and stability and the ability for people to live, especially along the borderline, peacefully without having to run away from the bombs, that's for the national interest as well. And I think that goes back to my previous speakers, that when you talk about nationalism, it has to do with considerations of individualism, it has to do with humanity, it also has to do with the respect of others. So I think there is no singular version of nationalism that a legal body can determine. What the role of the courts or the rule of law can play is to facilitate the process by which a society comes to an agreement or comes to a resolution how to proceed on and deal with a particular sets of conflicts. So in this particular case, if you look at the text of the Constitution, it is clearly, in my opinion, not the case where the Foreign Minister had to submit this agreement before the National Assembly, because otherwise it would produce quite a strange result, because it would in effect say that Thailand is actually engaging in a document that changes Thai territory, and that's even more complicated. And so the lesson learned from this event is perhaps if we let the political process continue its path without having unclear intervention by the law, there are ways and methods where the two sides can come to a resolution. Let's not forget that before Cambodia tried to list this site as UNESCO World Heritage Site, the two countries actually benefited from going across the border and enjoying this World Heritage Site. It was only until there was this tension, political, judicial and military tensions, that brought about these casualties. And interesting enough as well, after 2011 conflicts, it led to another series of World Court session in The Hague to try to come with a resolution. What exactly means the area surrounding the temple? And guess what? Now the two sides have to go back to the negotiating tables to come up with a joint agreement on where exactly lies the Thai territory and where exactly lies the Cambodian territory in the area surrounding the temple. So the lesson learned, I think, from this incident is there is no, the law is not always an answer to every solution. The law could facilitate the process, but there has to be a consideration that there is no single version of nationalism that the law can simply determine. And neither is an unelected 9 or 10 or 11 judges has the legitimacy to determine whether the whole nation is supposed to live under fear of the bombs, or are we supposed to march in and claim back certain parts or territory of the land. That is indeed a political question that has to be left to be answered through political means. And I think with this awareness that there are limits to the law and there has to be faith in democratic process, political process, to find resolutions to so many other problems faced by countries around the world these days. I hope that the second round of negotiations that are ongoing by the Thai and Cambodian sides will probably in some years produce a fruitful result, and one day we could see this temple of Puey here as a symbol of peace rather than a symbol of a clash of nationalism. Thank you.
Our final speaker for today is Dr. Griseldis Kirsch, a senior lecturer in contemporary Japanese culture at SOAS, who will be presenting her thoughts on concerning Japanese nationalism, the role of appropriation of Japanese history and split among nations of citizens within the country. She is also passionate about the Japanese creative industry, especially Japanese war memory and Sino-Japanese relations. She is a member of the Center for Film Studies and is involved in several organizations, including the European Association of Japanese Studies and the British Association for Japanese Studies. Please give a warm round of applause.
First of all, thank you for inviting me, and I'm very much aware that I'm the odd one out. So I hope I won't bore you to death. But initially, when I was invited, the organisers asked me for a quote regarding nationalism, and I couldn't really find one because I think at least not one that so succinctly like that one there sums it up. So I came up with nationalism is a media-administered opiate for the people, sort of Karl Marx, because I believe that we do need the media in order to tell us who we are or what constitutes a nation, by them telling us or conveying to us certain values and certain patterns of behaviour that conform to the culture that we grow up in. And that very much includes social media these days, where on the internet, Facebook, Twitter, everybody has an opinion about everything. And recently, be it this country or be it Japan, this is very much about dealing with the other and giving limitation to the own. I also think that, a little bit like the keynote speaker, nationalism is a byproduct or a product of modernity, or even post-modernity, and therefore, which again then links in with the media, you can't have it without a mass society which is upheld by the media. Consequently, when we look at Japanese nationalism, this emerged alongside Japanese modernity, alongside Japanese mass media towards the end of the 19th century, when Japan very rapidly modernized. And it was Japan's own narrowly avoiding of colonization by the British or the Americans that led to a feeling of superiority, which then the Japanese thought gave them license to colonize the rest of the continent, which in that sense for them only meant because they were superior and of divine descent, they could impose their ideas on others. In the late